Good evening from Los Angeles, California. I'm Dr. Ryan Alva. In 24 hours or so, the 2022 midterms will mostly and finally be over and done with. With one big elections to go, the Georgia Senate runoff, and everyone knows what's at stake here. Because even though this race between Democratic incumbent Senator Raphael Warnock and his Republican challenger and ex-football star Herschel Walker is not going to decide which party will control the Senate, a win for Warnock would give Democrats a kind of a cushion, a buffer now and into 2024. A ton of people have already voted. A record-setting number of people have already voted. Nearly 2 million. And that's kind of a mind-blowing number when you think about the fact that Georgia shrunk the runoff by like half this time around. So shorter runoff, more people coming out, and it was up to the candidates today to make their final attempt at securing the votes of their constituents.
Today, you can see where they are trying to get folks that still have not voted to come out tomorrow. This map breaks down the turnout battle, right? You've got Senator Warnock really focusing on the area around Atlanta, especially those suburbs, right? Walker's taking his bus around the exurbs of that big city. And Walker's kind of got a turnout problem, right? These are the general election results here. You can see that he lagged behind Republican Governor Brian Kemp by about 5 points. If you look at independents, that gap you're about to see is going to get even bigger, right? That means independents are going to be critical here. And a big thing we're looking at, concerns about Walker's judgment. With our exit polls from the general election showing nearly 2/3 of voters think that Walker struggles with that. Why is that a big deal? In part because of questions surrounding his judgment, with multiple women saying he pressured them into having an abortion, even though his political stance is firmly anti-abortion, and allegations he's abused women, including what we're hearing in an exclusive interview with Cheryl Parsa, the first woman to go on the record with any allegation against Walker. She's telling our Vaughn Hilliard about the violence she experienced during their 5-year relationship. Let's just talk about the dynamics at play in this race, because if you look at the data points, if you look at the limited polling, the spending, the early voting numbers so far, who has shown up to vote, it seems like Warnock is in a potentially stronger position than Walker. I was just on the phone with several people, even just this afternoon. And even like some smart Republican folks will sort of concede that point here. Maybe an uphill battle for Walker. However, if enough Republicans end up turning out on Election Day, he could end up in the Senate, right? I mean, that's how close this thing is.
And a big reason that these early voting numbers matter so much, Hallie, is because of what it looks like behind me here. We're expecting cold, frigid rain here in Georgia tomorrow yet again here. And when you're talking about lines in some places during early voting that we're sending from an hour to 2 hours, you're talking about big questions as to who ultimately turns out. And especially for Herschel Walker, he needs those hesitant conservatives and independents, those voters who went and voted for Republican Brian Kemp in the general election, but they did not vote for him. He needs those folks to turn out tomorrow. And when you see here the question of good judgment, this is another issue that is hampering Herschel Walker. It is more than this one allegation from Cheryl Parsa here, who is on the record and putting her name out there of her over the course of her 5-year relationship, accounting, you heard just that one episode of a physical assault here. But you have the likes of multiple women who have come forward alleging that Herschel Walker paid them to have abortions. There are also 3 kids of Herschel Walker's who he did not previously acknowledge to the public until this summer here. This is an uphill battle. And when you look at the spending numbers, Herschel Walker has been outspent by more than 2-to-1 margin compared to the Democratic aligned forces here in this race. And when you start to break down these early voting numbers, I think we got a graphic that kind of gives you a little bit better idea of what we're looking at here. The early vote turnout, we're talking about, number one, 76,000 voters who did not turn out in the general election, who did turn out here in the runoff, which is staggering. And I think we all got questions as to what led them to turn out for this runoff, but not the general. But when you look at the early voting numbers, you got 56% of them were women. In the general election, exit polling showed Raphael Warnock handily winning women voters here. And then when you look at here the breakdown of black voters and white voters here, you go back to 2020 in the runoff that took place 2 months after there that helped ascend the likes of Ossoff and Warnock. It was black voters that turned out in a greater share compared to the general election. So that is where Democrats are watching these numbers and ultimately who shows up tomorrow to really get a good understanding of where this race is headed.
I think that's a great breakdown of the state of play here when you have that tele-rally by former President Trump tonight. You've got everything that Raphael Warnock's doing. But let me ask you this, Vaughn, because you're in Georgia. Some of our viewers are in Georgia. A lot of our viewers are not in Georgia, but this still matters, right, to anybody who cares about representation in the Senate. Explain that, because there's a couple of pieces to this, which is why, even though this doesn't determine control of the Senate, Democrats would love to win this extra seat. Republicans would love to keep it at 50-50.
Right. We have watched Kamala Harris go to the Capitol to make a record number of tie-breaking votes for vice presidential, somebody serving in the vice presidency than ever before here over the course of these last 2 years. And so if you do have a +1 situation, number one, Kamala Harris would have to come out and be that tie-breaking vote fewer times. But also we'd probably be talking about Joe Manchin and the likes of Kyrsten Sinema less. But also when we're talking about judicial nominees and executive branch appointees that have to make their way through U.S. Senate confirmation, if in fact Raphael Warnock were to win, the committees would not be evenly split. You are talking about Democrats having a +1 member on each committee. So then not only when we're talking about legislation being passed through these committees, but also those judicial branch and executive branch nominees, if the Democrats vote in lockstep with one another, they do not need to convince a Republican in order to confirm those nominees, Hallie.
Vaughn Hill, you're live for us in Atlanta. I know it'll be a sleepless couple of nights for you, I am sure, Vaughn. Thank you for being with us.
To support my work, please subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up. Also, please don't forget to hit the bell icon so you wouldn't miss any of my new videos. Thanks for watching.